So Morris, I wonder if we can start with you. Years ago, there was a lot of hubbub about offshoring, with work being sent overseas to basically low-cost countries. Recently, there's been some research, and you've taken the lead on that, on a phenomenon called reshoring. And I wonder if you could start by explaining exactly what that is.
Sure. Maybe I could start by just putting the whole thing in context, because you said, there's been this phenomenon of outsourcing or offshoring, and now which suggests that companies, thinking primarily of U.S. companies, but it applies in fact to any company and any operating anywhere, of taking their operations, their manufacturing operations, and moving it somewhere else. And the most favored or the most obvious choice in the last 10 years has been China and other Asian sources, but there's been a lot of other places that manufacturing has gone. So just to put things in context, if you look at statistics of the manufacturing sector, and you look at the employment in manufacturing, and you look at the output of the manufacturing sector, there are these two lines. The output for the last 50, 100 years has been going up steadily. Employment has been more or less flat at about 20 million people for 40, 50 years. And so that raises the question, how could this happen? How could we be producing more and more manufactured products? Not only here, but this is also true in other developed countries and around the world, with fewer and fewer people. And there are many explanations, automation. Maybe everybody went to the Wharton School and learned how to be more efficient. We can hope, right, that we had some small impact there. But productivity has definitely gone up. And this is what's considered to be the normal pattern of economies developing. The same thing happened 100 years ago or more in the agricultural sector as well. But if you go back 10 years, this line of 20 million employment dropped by 5 million. And we're now below 15 or 11, 12 million, something like that, which had not happened for decades. So when we say there's been outshoring or globalization, that has been going on for decades, but there has been a fundamental shift, a transfer of manufacturing operations out of the US in the last 10 years, and we've lost 5, 6 million jobs. Meanwhile, output continues to more or less go up with some fluctuation. So that has been the phenomenon, and it's become a very politicized issue. The last election campaign, all the candidates told us they had an answer to this. And one of the phenomenon that people are starting to suggest is that we can solve this problem by bringing manufacturing back to the home country. And that's what the concept of reshoring is generally understood to mean.
So thank you, Morris. Now, Scott, turning to you, from your vantage point in the IT space, do you see the same trend that Morris is talking about of jobs essentially coming back to the U.S.?
I think it's a tremendous parallel between what's happened in manufacturing and what's now happening in technology. It's almost identical, but maybe just a little off in terms of timelines. If you look at the technology space, ever since really about Y2K, there's been a tremendous push of technology work and IT work offshore, and the primary location for that has been India. So manufacturing to China, technology to India. It's almost identical parallels. But we're definitely seeing, especially over the last even maybe just 12 months, maybe 2 years, a reshoring groundswell happening in the technology space as well. The first thing to realize is that there's a tremendous demand for technology talent. And this is a global demand. You see the same thing in Europe, you see it in Asia, you see it in the States. Everybody's in need of technology talent. But what we're seeing now is that CIOs, who are the primary buyers of technology talent in the market, are really looking for 4 options. They're looking for the ability to have technology talent on site. They're looking to still be able to offshore certain pieces of their portfolio. They're starting to now look for nearshore options to support their businesses in nearshore regions. But the new phenomenon is they're looking for onshore options, and these would be in lower cost but still high quality areas. So a tremendous parallel between manufacturing and technology is now happening.
That's great, and we'll come back to each of these factors in some more detail. But for the moment, I just wonder, coming back to you, Maurice, about what you said about manufacturing. So are there any striking examples of companies that have reshored their operations and that you could offer us?
Sure, and there are many, many of them, and many of them have been reported in the press. One of the most widely cited one, and I'm only going back, let's say, in the last 12 to 24 months, General Electric, investing $1 billion to bring back all of their appliance manufacturing to Kentucky. 5-10 years ago, they were ready to shut down the factory, offshored everything, and now they're bringing back appliance manufacturing. They're also bringing back GE as other manufacturing. That's one example. But there have been other examples. Apple announced that they're going to be making or assembling some computers in the US. Lenovo has announced that they're going to be assembling computers in the US. There are many, many examples. The question, though, that everybody is asking, and go back to my original point, we've lost 5 million jobs. Jobs are coming back, and we can talk later about the arguments why that's happening. But there are those who say we're never going to get those jobs back. Maybe we'll get 500,000 back. Maybe we'll get 1 million back, but we're not going to ever get back to where we were before. And others, the government is saying, no, we're going to quick jumpstart this whole process, and we will return to where we were. So this is a very open and hotly contested question. Yes, there's reshoring, but the same question, by the way, is asked in China and Japan. The reshoring to them is offshoring. Our reshoring is their offshoring. And they're also looking to offshore. And so these questions are being asked everywhere.
So if you look year to year, just for a quick follow-up, where's the net outflow or inflow of jobs? Is it still being more offshored rather than reshored, or is the trend starting to change?
I think we're gaining jobs in the last year, net positive. But as I said, the numbers are much smaller than the numbers that have gone out. And we're still losing jobs.
Right. Now, what do you see, Scott, in the technology space? Is it still? Do you see the volume of jobs coming back? Is it still greater than the volume of jobs that may be still going out?
See, I think, again, it's a very interesting parallel, and it's almost the same companies that are doing the same thing. You see GE and General Motors and MetLife has just announced, what they're calling a domestic development center or U.S. delivery center in the States. And so it's those large companies who are now starting to build up their own operations in the U.S. or working with partners like a Mindtree to do it for them. But this is probably in the early days. I think manufacturing has a couple years head start where we saw micro manufacturing starting to happen, and now you see some larger waves of manufacturing starting to happen. But I think this is the early days for technology, but it's clearly a trend that is very visible, and I think it'll be very hot. There will be definitely a lot of companies in the market looking for local talent.
Maurice, I wonder if you give some great examples of companies. Is there some broader trend we can see in terms of industries where reshoring is most visible and countries that are sending the most jobs back? Any overall observations there?
So that's a great question. If we go back to the origins of this, I mean, what has happened in the last 10 years is the decision to offshore, primarily to China and other places, to Asia, became what was called a no-brainer. You didn't have to do very much analysis. The labor cost, the wage differential between China and the U.S. was, an order of magnitude, if not more. And so companies said, at under $1 an hour and we're paying $25 an hour, or whatever the differences are, this is a, quote, a no-brainer. And so for 10 years, companies, and continue to do that, have said, we're going to go there. Now, in many industries, there are many other costs associated with where you source in the supply chain, as you can imagine. Plus, there are some very interesting trends. The labor costs in China have been going up much faster than here. The exchange rate continues to be an issue. Government regulation continues to be an issue. And there are some people now saying that we're approaching what they call a tipping point. I don't know if you know Hal Sirkin from BCG, is one example where he's famous for saying, once that wage differential gets below a certain point and we're close to it, then this advantage will have dissipated and they will come back. Now, to your question, where does this matter? Obviously, in industries like apparel, which have a high labor content, this is a no-brainer. But if you go to, one industry I do a lot of work with is aerospace and defense, making aircraft engines, it's not such a no-brainer. So where you need a lot of talent, technology, and I think IT is a very interesting situation where it's not just a question of low-cost labor. It never was, but in some industries that was to be dominant. But if you look at the labor cost in the fully loaded cost of a computer, an Apple computer, it's probably under 10%. So it doesn't really matter that much from the purpose of where they source if it's just a question of labor cost. And so all these other factors are coming into play. Some are pushing back to reshoring, some are continuing to push out. And the answers will very much depend on the technology and the industry.
Scott,
Yep.
what's your perspective?
Yeah, and it's almost identical in the tech sector. So I think the initial outsourcing and certainly offshoring efforts were clearly driven by labor arbitrage, but that's starting to change as well. Companies are looking for additional things like value add and productivity increases and time to market increases, things like that. So there's more than just labor arbitrage going into the equation. But I think it's important to note in the tech sector, I don't believe that it's an either or. I think it's that nearshoring or reshoring will continue to rise, but I think offshoring will continue to rise too, because I think the whole tech market is in a growth mode. So companies are really not looking for one or the other, they're looking for both. And it goes back to my initial point that CIOs and larger companies are really looking for options. They want to have the ability to get the best tech talent in multiple markets. So it's not like they're choosing India over the US or South America over India. It's really that they want all of that, but they just want to figure out what's the right balance for their company.